So, we don't have a screenshot of it. I can't say it definitely happened, but people saw it happen. And that's why we need to talk about this. That's why we need to talk about this, because that stuff still continues to happen. And also, if you say Matt, I need you to stop right now.
Yeah.
Like, we need to talk about that. Like, that's not gendered at all. Just stop saying that. It's so dismissive.
I got the notification that comment was there. I went to the page to see it. By the time I got to the page, he believed it. But I got the notification.
It was like Kristen Ross said it.
As I said, we should have advertised it as the panel that Joe Peacock has called man.
Okay, so we're going to talk about cons in this section, and I have been going to cons for over 10 years now. I met my husband at a con.
Which con was it?
It was the Pittsburgh
So you
Comic
did
Con.
go to get laid. No, I'm
Yeah.
kidding.
I was dressed as myself.
That is the sexiest character I can think of.
And the only convention that I've ever gone to where I haven't felt objectified or uncomfortable at some point was Morrison Con. And that's really sad. 10 years of going to conventions, and the only one, there was only one where I can say I felt completely comfortable from the moment that I walked in until the moment that I left.
I want to give a quick shout out, and not just because Sandy is in the audience, but I want to give a quick shout out to Horror Realm when we had our initial planning meeting about what we're going to talk about. I mentioned Horror Realm as a model of a good convention with lots of women, lots of men, some cosplay, everybody feeling comfortable. I've seen one actual problem come up, and it wasn't a harassment problem. It was someone who was behaving badly, and they were removed and asked not to come back.
Is that Kimberly Bennett?
It was not, although she's a sexual harasser for the ages.
She's like the male.
But I just, since I
And
met Horror Realm, I gotta
the
mention,
key to
Horror
that
Realm
is
a
to
safe space.
having organizers who will deal with things effectively and who will take complaints seriously. And a lot of the problem right now is that complaints weren't being taken seriously, or complaints were informal, or people were told to calm down. At things like Geek Girl Con, they have an actual no information bullying policy.
Oh.
It's not called that, but
It's
it's
my word.
It's in theirs. Let's see. I actually already talked about a lot of this stuff.
Do you have the new Scalzi harassment policy
on
your list?
For the SFWA?
No, for conventions. I'll talk about it in a minute.
Okay.
LJ's books.
Oh, because of Dragon Con. Is it Dragon Con?
Hey, what's up?
Thanks, Dragon Con.
I'm not sure. If she's
Whenever you
talking
can come
about
in,
if
I mean,
it's
the Olympic
Scalzi, it's
event now is
probably
going to be wrapped up by
the
4.
Science Fiction Con or the Whiz Con.
Oh, yeah. Well, 3 would be great because I have no one to run the counter, and so I'm doing things like answering.
But anyway,
A lot of this stuff is wrong.
But I figured you were busy, so.
Okay, so the main things, just to bring back up, that we were talking about is how, and Chris and I did something at a con last year where we talked to actually some of the people in this room about misogyny and sexism
We call
specifically.
it capes and misogyny.
Specifically at Comic-Con. And a lot of the things that Kristen was concerned with was like females wearing superhero t-shirts and getting ridicule or scorn.
Is that your boyfriend's t-shirt? That's so cute.
So can you guys talk about the different experience between male and females at cons, like specific things that's happened to you?
I won't talk about specific things that have happened to me, but I think that it's different when you live in a female body and you walk into a place, when you live in a male body and walk into a place, especially with a con, because it is a male-dominated space. There's no getting around that. Like it's like a hive of male gaze. And if you want to just experience things outside of that, or as a writer, like I've been behind the booth for many years, I was seen when I was at cons a lot as a booth babe when I was a creator. And that shouldn't be happening.
My favorite is you don't look like a writer. That's what you can say to me.
Yeah.
I'm like, what does a writer look like?
That's my favorite response.
Yeah. A writer looks like a dude to the person that asked that question.
The
Like,
answer
that's-
was the lady in misery is what writers are allegedly supposed to. I was like, what?
Well, let me get my sledgehammer
I know.
and see if I can change your mind.
That's true.
So, are comic book conventions in particular, are they toxic for females?
I think they can be.
I think they can be.
I think it depends on the con.
It's a good experience. though.
This is a good place to tell you guys about this John Scalzi thing. So I'm going to talk a lot about Science Fiction Writers Association because they're having a giant explosion of problems in my section. But one thing that ties in here is the now former president of SAFWA, Science Fiction Writers Association, has posted his policy on what conventions he will and will not attend. And he says any convention that does not have a stated harassment policy that includes specific things that could happen, not like if someone doesn't feel safe, they can come to us. But if any of these things happen, they can be reported to us. We have a designated person who is trained in this area, whose job is to handle this. This is the policy that we will follow to investigate these claims, and this is what will happen if we find that these claims are legitimate. The person will be removed from our membership, whatever it is. So he says he will no longer go to any convention that does not meet these requirements. He posted the whole thing on his blog. He's encouraging other writers to sign this pledge that says they won't go to any of these conventions, and writers are jumping all over it, male, female. Comic book creators are jumping on it. It's becoming a big thing, and this has just been in maybe the last 2 weeks. So I am hoping that things like that will make it a much safer space.
Right, because no one's saying like change the dress code. No one's saying stop cosplaying. No one. Well, people are saying booth babes shouldn't be there, which I think is wrong. But I mean, I had a problem with booth babes when I first started going to conventions too. And this is where I'm going to tell you it's okay to make mistakes, and it's okay to have like an opinion that may not be awesome when you first have it pop up in your brain. So then examine that feeling and be like, why do I feel like that? Why would that be wrong as far as from the outside? Because I know for certain that things came out of my mouth that were like, well, that girl doesn't belong here. I know I said shit like that. I know I did. But when you look back, those women, if we're talking about booth babes specifically, even if they were hired there to do a job, they were hired by a comic book creator who wants them at their booth. You still can't be like that. And that also pushes people away. Like, perhaps that woman was a model. She got hired. She doesn't know anything about comics. Maybe she starts getting interested when she's there. That could and can and does happen. But if people are treated immediately like pieces of meat, that's never going to happen.
We were absorbing your knowledge.
So, is there anything that we could do to help change that perception of females at cons are bad?
I think the first thing is talking about, like, the first thing is being aware of it or even thinking about it. I think a lot of these things are things that haven't been said out loud. I really do. I just think we haven't talked about it. Like,
Have a policy.
Yeah.
Have a policy and then enforce it, because what has happened in the past that has made women feel like some conventions are not a safe space, it's not the lack of policies. Almost everybody got one. They tend to be a little muddy, and then they tend to not be enforced, and that's where the issues came. Anybody who was following any of the big convention news that was happening about a year ago now, from comic conventions to skeptics conventions, was a huge sexual harassment issues and sexual assault issues at skeptic conventions last year. And if
Think
you
about that
start
for a
doing a little
second.
Googling, you'll find it.
science.
Yeah.
Was that what?
Yeah,
Like James Randi and
Richard
all of
Dawkins.
those people.
Yeah.
Was that the one with the elevator, where the guy got in the elevator with the girl? Oh, and he's still being a douchebag about that.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
it's
wait,
that
maybe we should
situation.
tell
If
people.
we're going to start getting into
Yeah.
the issues going on in the skeptic community now with sexual assault and things, it's horrible, but it's off topic. So, but in a lot of cases, somebody would do something that was very clearly against the convention's harassment policy. The person who was harassed would go to the organizers, and they would be like, but he's a really nice guy. Are you sure? And this is gaslighting. Are you sure that he was harassing you? maybe you just misunderstood. Maybe he was just trying to be friendly. Maybe he didn't realize that his hand was on your ass the entire time he was talking to you.
Oh, honey, you're making a big deal out of nothing.
You know, you're really going to embarrass someone who's been around for a long time and all of these things.
That's just how he is.
Yeah, that's the thing that has to stop.
Yeah, we've got to stop that.
Somebody brings a complaint, it has to be taken seriously, it has to be followed through. Not that every complaint is legitimate. There are genuinely misunderstandings. There are genuinely people who are so socially awkward that they do something that is not, assault, but it's uncomfortable and offensive, and they don't get it. But that is not the problem of the person they're doing it to. That is for someone else to handle.
I'm taken aback that there's socially awkward people at comic book conventions.
I know, right?
And do you think that some of the complaints maybe are, it's just this comic book guy trying to actually talk to a woman?
There are sometimes, but that doesn't excuse it.
What's that? Oh, I'm not saying.
I think sometimes it is. It's really genuinely socially awkward behavior that is perceived as offensive because it's offensive.
Which is fine, and that also goes along with it's okay to make mistakes. Like you can either go the formal route and explain that, or if you feel safe and you feel confident in yourself, and before that, women have to be able to feel safe and confident that they can say things. You could say to that person in front of you that just said something that made you feel uncomfortable, dude, that was weird. You are okay to say that, but you have to feel okay. You have to maybe have a policy behind you, or you have to know that the people that you're around will back you up. You have to have allies.
And that's the other thing is Rachel Eden, who is a comic book creator, actually just wrote a great piece for Wired that I think came out yesterday about why, even cons with harassment policies sometimes fall through. And part of it is just non-enforcement, and part of it is, she said, other people are afraid to get involved. Other people are afraid to step in and say, hey, what you're doing is not okay. And she said, it's hard to believe that you could be in a room with 1,000 people and this girl is standing there with somebody blatantly grabbing her ass and no one's moving towards it. But you see that happening, and it's you just freeze and you wait for someone else to do it, or you figure
it's a room full of people who idealize heroes.
Right, yeah, and
she
even
brings
an
opportunity to be a goddamn hero.
Yeah, and she brings up nobody moves forward to do this, and she's like, we have to stop this. When you see this harassment going on and you know it's wrong, and you know the cons policy is behind you, step in and say, hey, stop it.
I think it's really interesting. You need a policy, to say that's not okay. If I was right there and that was happening, not okay, everybody'd be like, hey, that's not okay.
Right.
But within the sphere of
and this ties right back into the cosplay thing where there's this perception, because a lot of the harassment is just come up with women who are in costume.
That's the whole
and a lot of the attitude is this they're asking for it. And so
the whole
why would I
cosplay is
step
not
in and do
consent.
anything? Look at that outfit she's wearing, and a lot of that comes from internalized sexism.
I think that's really helpful, and that does help advance what's going on is the campaign cosplay is not consent. Just because I'm wearing this costume, that doesn't mean I'm not also wearing a sign that says, hey, sexually harass me. Maybe, hey, come talk to me about the thing that we both enjoy.
While not sexually harassing me.
Right. While also being a human being.
I don't think that cosplayers would have a big problem with having confidence. I think that is part of their individual characters, to put those clothes. I mean, I've seen some pretty, revealing things at cons, and I get once a month, I put on tights and I go get people up in front of people. And sometimes, it's hard. I mean, it's just difficult. And that goes back to combat clothing, by the way. Something we talked about earlier.
Yeah, your combat clothing is not. It's a little revealing.
So we're going to move on, and the next topic is the Sci-Fi Writers Association.
For here on known as SEFWA, because I'm not saying Sci-Fi Writers Association.
SEFWA sounds cool.
So this, when we put it on the panel, it was this unwieldy discussion that I thought, wow, we're going to have a lot to talk about. And since we had our little discussion meeting a month ago about what we were going to talk about today, what is going on now has entirely dwarfed what I thought was already a huge topic. So I'm going to run down what has happened as quickly as possible. It's a whole page, and this is the shortest I'm going to make it. So basically, Science Fiction Writers Association, SEFWA. is a professional organization. It is basically a union. If you have written like 3 published short stories or 1 published novel on their approved list of magazines and publishers, which means if you pay to print your own novel, you do it through Create Space, you're in a zine that your buddy publishes, you can't get entry. If you're in Analog, Focus, any of the big magazines, if you're published by one of the big publishers or even one of the small presses, you can apply. You pay dues, you get benefits. I think they offer health care. It's just standard professional organization. Most of what they do is internal, and the world does not hear about it very often. And that has changed dramatically in the last 6 months. It started with a bulletin in January. They put out 4 bulletins a year, I think, or 5. They put out a bulletin in January. It was supposed to be like a tribute to women in Safwa. Awesome, right? They put Red Sonja on the cover, which is slightly problematic. Not that Red Sonja is not totally kick-ass herself. She's a female character created by a guy. So that was a little weird. You can find, when I give you this link that you'll all be able to go to check stuff out, you can find a phenomenal breakdown online of why the art was actually done so badly that if the woman portrayed on the cover was a real human with actual anatomy, she'd have 4 kneecaps and a boob coming out under her arm. It was talk about male gaze, and not even particularly artistically inclined male gaze. It was the most ridiculously sexualized, boob armor in the middle of the frozen tundra. Like, it was just absurd. People were a little annoyed about this because it was supposed to be this woman's issue. And they were like, wow, this is not really very female friendly. In the same bulletin, 2 guys, one of whom is a Safwa member, one of whom is not, both of whom are paid by Safwa for the writing that they put in the bulletin, decided to do an article about the women editors that they have worked with in Safwa. They refer to them repeatedly as lady editors, as opposed to editors, because there's editors and then there's lady editors, and broke basically all of them down to how they looked in swimsuits and how they were all va-va-voom and all the guys were raring to go at them. This was their tribute to women. A whole bunch of people within Safwa protested, wrote on the Safwa forum, wrote to Safwa expressing their dismay. April, the next issue of the bulletin comes out. In it is an article from another male writer who is a Safwa member who is paid to write an article about Barbie versus Bratz. I have no idea what that has to do with Safwa. Bratz dolls being the hypersexualized, heavily makeup dolls that we give small children. Barbie being Barbie. His comment was that Barbie would always win out over Bratz because, and I quote, Barbie is a nice girl who maintained her quiet dignity as a woman should.
Wait a minute, can I?
Also mentions that Barbie dates Ken, and she goes to college because she wants to be well-rounded, but she certainly doesn't think that she deserves a degree.
Why was this in a sci-fi newsletter?
Paid. To be in a sci-fi newsletter. No, wait, it gets better. The next bulletin comes out 1 month later. The original authors, the 2 guys that wrote the first article, respond to all of the commentary. They use words like thought police. They use words like fascist. They say that they are being taken down for being white.
How does that have to do with it?
Yeah. We'll
We
get
got
to that.
99 problems.
Yeah, right?
They said they do not understand why anybody is upset by anything they said, and basically what it boils down to is, but we were complimenting you. Why were you offended that we said you look nice in a bathing suit? So then, at this point, the people in Safwa who are offended by this are absolutely done being quiet, and they start spreading the word outside of the organization, and the internet just goes berserk. A lot of people like me who have been reading science fiction and fantasy since they were little kids, who have never particularly loved the state of women in science fiction and fantasy, but hope for something better, all start sounding off on it. People start writing blog posts. The 2 guys who wrote the article, oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you the kicker. The editor of the bulletin who approved all of these things, female. Read all of this, and had no problem with any of it. So they start saying things like, well, you're just all trying to oppress us, and you all knew what was coming out, and I don't know what the problem is. They start claiming that all these people are anonymously attacking them, when I will be able to show you a website that will link you to pages and pages and pages of absolutely credited quotes. Nobody attacked them anonymously. Everybody attached their name to these things. At that point, the president, who at the time was John Scalzi, apologized, said, these things came across my desk, I didn't really read them. Ultimately, it's the editor's job, but